Shimano's 105 R7000 group set delivers nearly all the performance of Ultegra R8000 in a slightly heavier and slightly less refined feeling, but considerably more affordable package. To give context to those that are new to the sport, 105 is Shimano's third tier road group set, sitting below Dura-Ace and Ultegra and above Sora and Tiagra. Now today I'm going to be talking you through the 105 group set as fitted to this Ribble gravel bike. However, for my own personal testing, I've used it on a number of different bikes. First off, we have my All City Mr. Pink. Now although that didn't have a Shimano crankset, I used the majority of the group set on that bike, and it was quite interesting to see how it worked with components from other manufacturers. I also have it on my old Genesis Croix de Fer, where I'm running the full hydraulic disc version of the group set. Lastly, I have also used the rim brake version of the group set in whole on a number of different test bikes. So I've put a lot of time onto this group set, and I'm very confident with what I have to say. In typical Shimano fashion, when R7000 was launched a couple of years ago now, tech that was previously seen on its higher tier group sets was trickled down to the 105 level. As part of that, the overall look of the group set was also updated, and visually the group set looks super premium with a kind of overall finish which wouldn't have been out of place on Ultegra or Dura-Ace a few short years ago. To the delight of many, the fashionistas, the classicos amongst us, the group set is also available in a handsome brushed silver finish. It's a totally unfussy workhorse of a group set with enough spec options and upgrade paths that will leave only the very most demanding riders wanting. In this review, I'm going to deal with each component in both the rim and disc variants of the 105 group set in isolation. This will make it easier if you're looking to upgrade individual components or if you're just interested in how individual parts of the group set perform. It's an 11-speed group set which is only available in double variants but is available in both disc and rim brake options. It is commonly fitted on bikes in the £1,000 to £2,500 range, and how it performs, well, you'll have to watch the video to find out. Before we crack on, my beautiful garms, my fashionable cycling clothing is not of my own choosing. This is from our sponsors Freewheel, and you can check out details on all of this kit in the link in the video description. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe so every time we upload a video like this, you will get a notification. Now, one final note before we crack on. In this review, I have chosen to quote the RRP pricing for the rim brake variant of the 105 group set. Now, if you know Shimano's group sets, you will know that RRP pricing has very little bearing on reality. The pricing for online retailers is always a good deal cheaper than RRP pricing. However, it's a measurable thing, it's what Shimano provides, and it gives the best way to compare Ultegra to Dura-Ace to 105 and so on. So it's RRP pricing throughout. Now we're going to start off with the shifters, or if you prefer Shimano's lingo, the dual control shifters. And these outwardly are very similar to both Ultegra and Dura-Ace. All three of these feature the new shifter style, with ever so slightly flattened tops and a textured grip on the top of the hoods. The overall profile of the lever itself has also been subtly altered, which makes it easier to find with your index finger when you're braking from the drops. On the disc side of things, with 105 R7000, we bid farewell to Shimano's ugliest ever product, the ST RS 505 shifters. This was a non-series but unofficially 105 level shifter which gave you hydraulic braking and mechanical shifting. It was very ugly, with a strange bulbous look that was almost universally derided for its lumpen overall profile. Compared to the rim brake lever, the ST R7020 brake lever is ever so slightly larger, but is barely noticeable in the hand. However, if anything, this very slightly wider profile gives a slightly more comfortable platform for my hands, but depending on the size of your phalanges, your results may vary. For children or those with smaller hands in general, there is also the ST R7020 lever, which is pretty much exactly the same as these ones, but ever so slightly smaller. It's worth noting, however, that this is only limited to a disc variant. There is no smaller lever for a rim brake option. The main difference between Ultegra and Dura-Ace level levers just comes down to construction. The higher tier group sets get a carbon fibre reinforced plastic body and levers, whereas with 105 you get a glass fibre reinforced plastic body and alloy levers, so it's a bit heavier overall. On the disc side of things, moving to Ultegra and Dura-Ace also gets you servo wave. Servo wave is a long-running Shimano technology which has been borrowed from its mountain bike brakes. It's slightly complex to understand, but in short, servo wave makes the relationship between the lever and the pad non-linear, and that is claimed to improve modulation. I have used Ultegra, Dura-Ace and 105 levers extensively, and honestly, I'd be pretty hard pushed to tell the difference between the servo wave equipped and non-servo wave equipped levers. It's very, very marginal at best. In terms of the build quality, Ultegra and Dura-Ace just feel that little bit nicer than 105. There's less lateral slop when you kind of get to the end of the lever stroke. With 105 it tends to flex a little bit inside the lever body, but that again is so marginal, and you have to be looking for this stuff to actually notice it. Again, none of this is a performance issue, and it really is feel alone that separates the 105 level shifters from Shimano's higher tier group sets. However, to caveat all that, if I was desperate to upgrade one part on a 105 equipped bike, it probably would be the shifters. The reason being that it is your single contact point with the group set of the bike. And if you really prioritise a good feel and I guess more reliability arguably down the line, then that would be a worthwhile upgrade, but it's not one I'd be rushing to make. Moving on to the rear derailleur, and Shimano's 105 level shifting is smooth, predictable and light. It really is almost as good as it gets. Of all the parts of the group set, this presents the most significant upgrade compared to the previous generation, and it also adopts Shimano's Shadow Plus technology, which essentially moves the derailleur out of the way underneath the chainset. So in the event of a crash, or dropping your bike when you're filming videos out in the middle of a field, you're less likely to damage the derailleur. For the sake of clarity, and it says more about my weak little cyclist legs than anything else, but I've exclusively tested the GS version of the derailleur. This is the medium cage version of the derailleur and accommodates wider range gearing compared to the SS or short cage version. However, I've no doubt that the performance between the two would be almost identical, if not exactly the same. With that in mind, if I was building up a bike from scratch, I would absolutely be speccing the GS version because it gives you a tooth capacity of 39 teeth. This gives you a super wide range, which means you can even build a bike up with 105 suitable for gravel riding, as seen here with this lovely ribble. Using the GS derailleur would allow you to use the lowest gearing possible with a 105 group set, and that's a 50-34 crankset matched with an 11-34 cassette. 1-to-1 gearing is very low on a road bike. You could pretty much climb a wall with that, but like I said, it does mean you get a little bit of gravelability in with this group set. However, Shimano tends to be pretty conservative with those numbers, so while it wouldn't be officially supported, I reckon you could probably go for a bigger cassette on there. But why you would need one, well, I guess you're just not as hard as me. If you prefer a tighter space cassette, there is also an 11-25, 11-28, 11-30 and 11-32 cassette available at a 105 level. The 11-34 cassette I mentioned, which if you're really interested in Shimano naming conventions, is actually not a 105 component. It's a non-series component and it's the HG 700 cassette. Thrilling stuff. On that note, that cassette is actually compatible with a 10-speed free hub, as the largest cog, which is mounted on a spider, will not foul the spokes. So if you have a lovely set of old 10-speed wheels and you can't upgrade the free hub, this could be a really good way to get you onto an 11-speed group set. Compared to Ultegra or Dura-Ace, shifting up the block does not feel quite as crisp on 105. It never protested. You can really abuse this group set, and I've done all sorts of nonsense and aggressive silly sprints with my friends, but it doesn't have that kind of clarity in the shift compared to higher end group sets. If you grab the derailleur and give it a really solid twist, there is definitely also a bit more slop overall in the derailleur. How often do you go and grab your derailleur and give it a nice twist? Never. So how much this actually adds up to difference in the real world is contestable. The jockey wheels also run on bushings, whereas with Ultegra, one runs on a bearing and one on a bushing, and with Dura-Ace, both run on bearings. Again, how much of a bearing this has on performance is debatable, but I guess in the long run, you may have to replace these a little bit quicker than with Ultegra or Dura-Ace. Onto the front derailleur. Yes, they do still exist. One by hasn't quite completely taken over in the road world, and the front shifting with Shimano, I think, is the best on the market. Setup of the group set presents nothing out of the ordinary. If you've built a bike before, you'll be fine. The one place that is a little bit confusing at the start, when you first set one up, is the front shifting. It's not bad at all, it's just very different to previous generation Shimano and arguably other group sets, with a kind of funny cable routing which runs over the top of the knuckle of the derailleur. If you've never worked on it before, definitely check out some guides online or the Shimano manual, because you will save yourself a lot of faff in the long run. Initial confusion aside, it is honestly really easy to live with, and one thing I particularly like is the inbuilt tension adjuster. So there's a very small hex head built into the derailleur that, if you twist, will add tension to the cable. This means you don't have to use a super ugly inline adjuster, and also how many bikes these days have adjusters on the down tube, so having that there neatens things up. In terms of performance, there's no distinguishable difference between Ultegra and Dura-Ace and 105. The front shifting is super quick, super light, incredibly fast, it doesn't lag, and honestly, of all the things you can measure Shimano by, I genuinely believe the front shifting far exceeds its rivals. The new style derailleurs also lose that super long actuation arm which was seen on the previous generation. This has improved tyre clearances and means again you can run the derailleur more comfortably with gravel bikes or just wider tyres in general. This improved geometry and the small rubber block on the inside face of the derailleur means you can cross-chain to your heart's content with no audible protestation from the derailleur. However, do not take that as an open invitation, because cross-chaining is bad. Onto the crankset, the crowning glory of any group set in my opinion, and Shimano is stuck steadfastly with its classic alloy bonded construction for the R7000 crankset. Likewise, it sticks with a standard Holotech 2 style 24mm spindle, easing compatibility across all bottom bracket standards. Though it is nominally a 105 level product, the BBR60 bottom bracket is now shared across 105 and Ultegra. This new bottom bracket features improved sealing, so hopefully it should last a little bit longer than the outgoing model. A press fit equivalent is also available. In terms of ratios, 105 cranksets are available in 53:39, 52:36 and 50:34 ratios. On Dura-Ace, that is also available in a monstrous 55-42 tooth combination, as well as in a 54-44 tooth combination. All modern Shimano cranksets share the same asymmetric 110mm BCD pattern. This means that chainrings from 105, Dura-Ace, Ultegra, what have you, they are all intercompatible. So if any of the stock options do not suit you, you can buy to your heart's content to get a unique combination. There is also oodles and oodles of weird oval, one by what have you options out in the aftermarket. So again, there's loads of customization available there. A 175mm long crankset with a 52-36 tooth combination weighed 752 grams on our scales of truth. In comparison, an Ultegra crankset in the same combination would weigh a claimed 681 grams. This is one of the few places where there is actually a significant weight saving between Ultegra and 105. So if that matters to you, Ultegra is the place to go. With that said, weight, when it comes to 105, would never be a deciding factor for me. 105 is light enough, and if you want the very lightest group set possible, you shouldn't be looking here. This is a workhorse of a group set, it's very functional, and it's very good at what it claims to be. I have never managed to elicit the slightest bit of flex from any Shimano crank of any level, and 105 is no different. If you can bend these things, you are a verified monster. As I mentioned, I think the crankset is the centerpiece of any group set, and I think this crankset looks really good. The finish is very premium, and anecdotally, with all the test bikes I have used, it wears much better than the previous generation of 105. Rim braking on 105 sees a significant improvement compared to the previous generation, but it isn't quite as snappy and sharp feeling as Ultegra. On Ultegra and Dura-Ace, there's this really thin steel stiffening plate which sits between the two pivots on the brake. and I suspect this has a lot to do with the increased stiffness and the overall improved feel with those brakes. That is absent on 105 for reasons unknown to me, but is something I'd really like to see whenever the next generation comes out. Of course, who's to say maybe the next generation won't have rim brakes because me, a paid up member of the cycling Illuminati, are trying to force you to buy disc brakes. No, I'm just kidding. Of course 105 will always have rim brakes. Shimano has always offered them at every level of its group sets, and I would be genuinely surprised if the next generation doesn't have rim brakes. So surprised, I will eat this saddle if it doesn't have rim brakes. Hold me to that in a couple of years' time. Clearance on the rim brakes has also been significantly improved. I have confidently used a 28mm Panaracer gravel cling tyre mounted to a relatively wide H+Sun archetype rim with mud guards, and there's no problems whatsoever there. I reckon, depending on the tyre, you probably could squeeze a 30mm tyre in there without too much issue. So again, things have improved a little bit in that area. On the disc side of things, I would really struggle to tell the difference between Dura-Ace, Ultegra and 105 in normal conditions. There is absolutely bucket loads of power on tap, and the overall feel of the lever is really good. This is true of all Shimano group sets, but I also like that with Shimano, it has much more generous pad clearance than SRAM. This means that in wet or grimy or gravelly conditions, you're much less likely to suffer from that constant and dementing hiss as mud makes its way and eats your pads in the course of a single ride. It is possible that moving from the bog standard steel rotors as seen on 105 to an IceTech equipped model, which uses sandwiched steel and alloy construction to improve heat dissipation, could improve performance on longer descents. I think the difference is likely to be pretty marginal, but let's not pretend. The IceTech rotors look cool, and if you want to buy them for that reason alone, I won't judge. It is worth mentioning that 105 R7000 calipers are only available in a flat mount fit now. If you would like to run R7000 brakes on a post-mount or IS frame, you would have to go for an adapter, but these are not officially supported by Shimano and they won't work with all frames. The only one I've actually found that looks any good is by AS Solutions, and I've got a little link to them in the video description. Otherwise, you'd have to use a non-series caliper. I've actually done this on a previous build, and again, the difference, I don't think there really is a difference. It is just the overall shape of the caliper, so that shouldn't put you off. Beyond weight and a very slight difference in feel, there is now very, very little that separates 105 from Ultegra. Likewise, if you are a chronic weight weenie, it's possible that Ultegra may make a more compelling option for you. It is a fool's errand trying to determine a complete group set weight for any group set. There's so many variables that make enough of a difference to matter. But in a comparable spec to a standard 105 group set, I worked out that on average you'll save about 310 grams. That's not a lot of weight. You could so easily lose that from other parts of your bike with a much less outlay, and like the rest of us, I could do with losing it myself. Likewise, in terms of cost, it's really hard to make a comparison between the two, but at the time of writing, if you're comparing a 105 rim brake group set to an Ultegra rim brake group set, you would probably spend about £160 more at street pricing. Again, refer to your preferred retailer for actual pricing, but that gives you a rough estimate of what you're looking at. If you want an utterly dependable workhorse of a group set that has nearly all the performance of Ultegra or Dura-Ace, 105 R7000 in any of its variants comes highly recommended. Thank you very much for watching. As always, please leave any questions or thoughts in the comments. I always look at them, I love feedback, I want to know how much my long, luscious locks upset you, and I do always read them. Don't forget to like and subscribe and click that little bell icon, so every time we upload a video, you will get a notification. And once again, thank you to Freewheel for decking me out in my beautiful garms.